Hey there, internet friends, and welcome to That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions. If you like the show, we'd love it if you like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Joining me this week, we have Logan Wilkinson. How you doing, Logan?
I'm doing wonderful. It is always a
Excellent.
pleasure.
Excellent. Yeah, today we're going to be talking all about West Side Story, specifically the 2021 Steven Spielberg directed version of West Side Story. As for why we picked it, in large part because it's new and fresh, and it's been a while since we've done since I've sat down and in particular and chatted like a musical with you that wasn't just like like an animated thing. Like obviously Cameron and I did Encanto a little while ago and stuff like that. But this big, one of the best known musicals of probably all time, making its way, getting a very high profile remake with Steven Spielberg that was like years in the making, literally because of the pandemic. It basically got delayed another year. But yeah, so figured let's sit down and talk about this. Also, you got like super into Sondheim after Tick Tick Boom, so that also felt like it would be a fun, appropriate pick, given that this was famously Sondheim's really his first kind of big Broadway thing. In particular, he was not yet a composer for this one. This is this and Gypsy, I believe he's just the lyricist on, and would not get into composition and stuff until after that. But still, definitely kind of hit the ground running, as Tick Tick Boom, in particular, likes to kind of highlight. Before he was 30. So a little bit of the history lesson for you on this. Originally released December 10th of 2021. Other notable releases of the time were Tick Tick Boom, come out November 12th, King Richard, November 19th, Encanto, November 24th, Being the Ricardos, December 10th, Spider-Man No Way Home, December 17th, The Matrix Resurrections, December 22nd, and going into this year, one of the first big releases of 2022 was Scream, out on January 14th, which I believe is the fifth installment of the Scream franchise / soft reboot. Yeah. I've not really watched any of them, so has a runtime here of 2 hours and 36 minutes, and in the 20th Century Studios timeline of things, because this is technically kind of falls under that banner rather than Disney proper. You had Ron's Gone Wrong, that had come out October 22nd, Home Sweet Home Alone November 12th, West Side Story here on December 10th, The King's Man came out December 22nd, and Death of the Nile came out February 11th, 2022, which I threw out there because I knew you saw that one recently.
I did. I liked it.
Before we dive into, I guess, the roll call of this, I do want to just kind of pick your brain a little bit on the original West Side Story, either the original film version, or if you've seen like the like any performances or productions of the musical. What's kind of your history with West Side Story there, Logan?
I saw the film version of West Side Story, at least the first time I can like distinctly remember it, in high school, where we watched it during either a film or a like music appreciation kind of class, and basically watching it there, it's a Trevor's pulling the DVD up right now.
I literally have it. Yeah, I had it in arm's reach, basically.
It's a classic, right? It's great. There are like distinct scenes in the original one from 1961 that like I will still throw on and watch even now. And so, because I think there are certain moments that are really great. The film as a whole, I think, is okay to good. It's a little harsh. It's good for sure, and like a classic for a reason. I think, as we'll kind of get into, the 2021 film is a better film as a whole, I think. But yeah, I mean, it would have probably been the very first Sondheim anything I would have ever consumed when I watched it, both as a kid when it was on TV, and then also kind of more as a young teenager, adult in high school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't remember when I first would have watched it myself. I do obviously have I have it on DVD here, and this is probably going back to those like early DVD days in this apartment. So I've had it for quite a while. It's always fascinating now watching it, having been in Romeo and Juliet and just seeing like just the straight up like, you know, moments pulled from Romeo and Juliet or like this version of those moments. I don't remember like when I would have ever first watched it. It might have been like when I was in high school or something like that, but it might have been like, it might not have been until I was actually like studying theater in college and stuff. But I've probably seen it live a few times as well over the years. In particular, I remember one time when it came through Gamage, seeing it, and this would have been the revival from a few years ago that had kind of input from Lin-Manuel Miranda, hot off of, you know, In the Heights fame at that time. And it was, I think it even might have had kind of the Tony Kushner kind of influences and kind of like adjustments to the book that this movie kind of pulls from. And where I remember at the time, the like big kind of talking point of that tour and of that revival was that the Sharks had a little bit more like equality in the script, and it wasn't just like everything Anglo, you know, the
from the Jets
everything anglicized from the Jets perspective. So seeing this movie kind of really embrace that same mentality and have those, it'll be one of the trivia things, but like the fact that the Spanish speaking isn't subtitled, and it was that was a very deliberate choice from Spielberg to frame, you know, both sides of this feud as, you know, equal. I think was an interesting perspective. The only other thing I remember from that like production of seeing it was the guy playing Tony in that. Terrible. But I specifically remember his play, like in the playbill, his bio pointing out the fact that he had been Tony in the College Humor video called Website Story that was basically like a parody. And it's still out there. You can go find it on YouTube. I watched it, you know, a couple days ago, kind of in the lead up to this. But it's like, it's basically, you know, parody songs from West Side Story, but for like, you know, talking about websites and you know, Twitter and social media and stuff like that. And just like, he works fine in that, in a very short form, like bite-sized thing. But it was a fascinating thing to realize I had seen him before in that, before he actually got cast as Tony and, you know, was doing that as part of like a national tour kind of thing. But yeah, I think one of the other issues I always struggled with, especially weirdly here in Arizona, I will say, is other productions that I have known of have far too often not featured ethnically diverse and or like appropriately casts. Like I've known a few very white performers in the community here in Phoenix that played Maria. And there, similarly, I think there's, you know, also that issue with like Natalie Wood being Maria in the original is a little bit. So I think like it was one of those, it tends to be a conversation piece, especially here in Arizona, where you could theoretically get significant Hispanic population to come in and play these roles. And so like anytime you get like, it would always kind of spark a conversation on Facebook of like, for both the company putting on the show as well as like the person who had accepted the role of being Maria, like why are you taking that on? Sure, great dream role for songs and whatnot, but also realize your whiteness and maybe don't accept the role. So yeah, it's been a fascinating kind of like seeing the conversation on that change over the years. And so I think this version being very, very specifically cast with Latinx performers and stuff as the sharks, and that side of the equation, I think is a much better, it's just good to see like that kind of representation on film for this one. So shout out to Steven Spielberg for, really fully embracing that.
I forgot that, this is just like a long, because you touched on it briefly. I forgot that Natalie Wood was married to Robert Wagner, and also Natalie Wood's sister, Lana Woods, is in Diamonds Are Forever as Pliny O'Toole.
Yep.
So I forgot all of that information. I was like, oh, right, Robert Wagner. And then I was like, oh, right, Robert Wagner. And then Lana Woods and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember.
What a weird career.
I remember being reminded of / introduced to some of that when we did Diamonds Are Forever. And when I looked at the trivia and saw like Lana Woods and whoever was the other person in like the other
Jill St.
female
John.
lead. Yeah, her. Like they had a lot of like tension on set because of those issues and stuff.
Jill St. John would marry Robert Wagner later on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so diving back into the roll call, of course, director here, Steven Spielberg.
You included like everything he's ever done.
I included almost everything he's ever done in the doc, just to kind of like pick and choose from stuff. Getting his start, obviously,
to highlight his filmography.
With stuff like Jaws and Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I mean, again, kind of sticking to the Phoenix theme. He actually debuted some of his like earliest film work and like his short films and stuff at Phoenix Theater, where I worked many, many years ago, as it like in their little theater black. Like at the time kind of black box space. He basically like put it up there and is like still kind of a prominent figure in the history of Phoenix Theater, came back or at least like participated in some degree in like their recent 100th anniversary celebration, that I think was probably cut short because of the pandemic a little bit, but like he's got like a little, letter, thanking Phoenix Theater for its place in the community and stuff, like up there in the lobby of the theater. So that's just a cool little, additional fun fact. But of course, also the Indiana Jones movies, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, The Color Purple, which is getting a remake of the musical coming out soon. Hook, Jurassic Park, Schindler's List.
Yeah.
Like I always forget that Schindler's List actually came out after Jurassic Park. Like for some reason that seems like so much older to me, and I think it's probably because of the black and white. But
it's interesting too because they were. This is like one of the weird things I know. Like a lot. Spielberg is my favorite director, so I know a lot about him in general. But like Jurassic Park and Schindler's List is interesting too because they're basically filmed like at parallel times. Like so, like a lot of like Jurassic Park's post work, Spielberg was actually like doing Schindler's List on, so he wasn't like as hands on that, and then like kind of bouncing back with the two projects that are each like all-time great films in very, very different ways. I think just kind of shows the skill he had in kind of balancing both those projects at the same time.
Yeah. Tons of other stuff out there. Catch Me If You Can, War of the Worlds,
Saving Private Ryan.
Saving Private Ryan, War Horse, Lincoln, The Post, which you and I saw together.
Yeah.
which like I had completely like forgotten that was a movie that existed, let alone that it was a Spielberg movie. Ready Player One, which I've always been like a bigger fan of than I recognize I should be. And that was really one of his most recent ones, was Ready Player One prior to this. And then up on his slate next is a project called The Fabelmans, which he's working on with the next person on this list, Tony Kushner, who did the screenplay here. Done a ton of theater stuff, most notably probably his work with Angels in America. But he also collaborated with Steven Spielberg on projects like Munich, Lincoln, now West Side Story, and The Fabelmans coming up. The original stage play and book was by Arthur Lawrence, who gets a credit nod here. Really doesn't have a ton in the way of other like standout credits. He did the screenplay for the Alfred Hitchcock film Rope prior to West Side Story. But then he would do West Side Story as well as Gypsy. That's pretty much his kind of filmography, as well as like the brunt of his theatrical work was West Side Story and Gypsy. While not credited as writers, I of course had to pull them in here. One, Stephen Sondheim, again, having worked on the lyrics. West Side Story being one of his first forays, alongside Gypsy. And then he got into composition and became kind of the full-blown composer that people would know Stephen Sondheim as for many, many years down the line, with things like A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, Company, Follies, Sweeney Todd, Sunday in the Park with George, and Into the Woods.
Yes.
And also, like, weirdly not a writer, of course, but Jerome Robbins' choreography, as well as his work as the original director, or the director of the original West Side Story, is so iconically West Side Story that it's very rare you would see a performance of West Side Story that does not have Jerome Robbins' choreography in some form or fashion. And a lot of it still kind of lives on in through this version, while they also kind of pave their own path as well in some of the other elements. But he, of course, known for projects like Peter Pan, The King and I, West Side Story, Gypsy, and Fiddler on the Roof. Starring Ansel Elgort as Tony, from the Divergent series.
I didn't realize he was in Divergent. Yeah. With Shailene Woodley?
Yep. He's also in The Fault in Our Stars and Baby Driver. Rachel Zegler playing Maria in her largely feature film debut. Like, she had a couple like podcast / video short things prior to this, but that was pretty much like her film debut. But she is also currently slated to appear in the upcoming Shazam sequel, Shazam: Fury of the Gods, as well as Disney's Snow White, the live action version of that is currently filming in the UK right now.
Is she Snow White?
Yes. Yep. She's going to be Snow White. Ariana DeBose playing Anita. You and I talked about this a little bit already off air the other day, but it was fun for me realizing that she is the like personification of death ensemble character in the Hamilton Disney Plus, like the version of Hamilton that's out there. She's also in The Prom. She was in Schmigadoon, which I really enjoyed last year. And she's going to be in assuming it happens, the upcoming Kraven the Hunter standalone film from Sony, because Sony's just going to do whatever they can with the Spider-Man license that they have. So shout out to Ariana DeBose. David Alvarez playing Bernardo. This was a fun one to realize he is one of the 3 Tony Award winners for the role of Billy Elliot in Billy Elliot the Musical. He was one of the original Billy Elliots, and it was like a groundbreaking kind of thing because of the demanding nature of that role, and having children in that role. He and 2 other boys basically were like all nominated together and ended up winning the Tony Award as a little trio for that. And so realizing that he was one of those was a cool little fun thing. He's mostly a Broadway performer, but he is also in the series American Rust. Rita Moreno, of course, iconically Anita in the original West Side Story film.
Won the Academy Award.
It won the Academy Award for it. Seems to be the and that seems to be the path that Ariana DeBose is going to also kind of follow. Getting the she seems to be the front runner for the supporting actress award this year. She is playing the Doc role here, recast as Valentina, which I think is one of the more interesting kind of diversions of this interpretation. Which, of course, prolific career, but included in that many years on The Electric Company. She's also the voice of Carmen Sandiego in the series Where on Earth is Carmen Sandiego? And she was in the series Oz. Brian Darcy James playing Officer Krupke here, another Broadway kind of legend and standout. I first feel like I started seeing him in the series Smash, which was it was basically like, hey, let's capitalize on the popularity of Glee, but let's actually use like Broadway caliber talent. And so he was in that for the 2 seasons that was on the air. He's Shrek in Shrek the Musical. If you find the video of that, which might still be on Netflix. I don't know where that's streamable these days, but he's phenomenal in that. He was in the movie Spotlight. He was the original King George III off Broadway.
Mm-hmm. That's where I know him from.
Yep. Yeah. Before Jonathan Groff would come in as kind of the iconic, like on the soundtrack of it. But yeah, he was the first King George. And then he had a small little bit role in Hawkeye as Kate Bishop's father in the first episode. Corey Stoll, playing Lieutenant Schrank here, probably best known to people from House of Cards as well as Ant-Man. Mike Feist, playing Riff here. He was in the original off-Broadway cast of Newsies, playing, I forgot who it was, Collins or something like that. I don't know. But he is not in the version that you'll see on Disney Plus. He did eventually come back to the show at some point, but he is the original Connor Murphy in Dear Evan Hansen. So if you have that Broadway soundtrack, you can hear Mike Feist's voice in that. And he is also in the film Panic. Josh Andres Rivera playing Chino has also been in the Hamilton ensemble. Arais Manis playing Anybody's, non-binary actor playing that role. I thought was a cool, interesting choice. Obviously, Anybody's typically a tomboy character, so going with a non-binary performer for that was neat. They are currently featured in the Ridley Jones animated series. And then this last one, I just wanted to give a little shout out to Ben Cook, who plays Mouthpiece, is in the Broadway version of Newsies that you can find on Disney Plus, and like sticks out like a sore thumb to me because he's playing like he's almost essentially the exact same character, just some 40-50 years apart. But it's like it's just funny to see him play that New Yorker street kid type. Trivia. The songs One Hand, One Heart and A Boy Like That, I Have a Love were performed live on set by Ansel Elgort and Rachel Zegler and Ariana Dubose and Zegler, respectively. Sections of Maria were also sung live on set by Elgort, as per his request. All other songs were filmed to the more traditional playback technique, but Somewhere was also sung live on set by Rita Moreno. Contrasting with most modern movie musicals, almost the entirety of the cast is made up of musical theater performers unknown or largely unknown to mainstream film audiences. Rita Moreno being the most famous among the lead cast as an EGOT winner herself, except of course Ansel Elgort, who became famous through non-musical films, Rachel Zegler, who got cast straight out of high school, and Corey Stoll, who's previously worked on TV, but also has a few supporting film roles. But everybody else, all the other principals, are Broadway alums. Considering the relatively large 60-year time span between the original and this production, there are actually 3 actors who appeared in the 1961 release, reprising different roles in this 2021 production. Of course, Rita Moreno being the most iconic there, having played Anita and now Valentina. But Harvey Evans plays Gimbel's security guard, and David Bean plays the fabric store owner in the I Want to Live in America sequence. They were both members of the Jets in the original, respectively playing Mouthpiece and Tiger. Sadly, Evans passed away 2 weeks after the film's release.
It is. I hadn't done the math at all. And it's also an element of me, like, my brain permanently being stuck in, like, 2000 to 2009 window, right? So, like, it's 40 years ago kind of thing, forever for me in the 60s. But it's like, yeah, it's 60 years difference between 2 films, which is an absolutely insane statistic.
Yeah. Steven Spielberg originally offered Rita Moreno a chance to be in the new West Side Story, but she thought it was only a cameo, so she declined, until she learned she would be playing a supporting role, that of Valentina, newly imagined character, the widow of the drugstore owner Doc in the original version. This was released posthumously after Steven Sondheim, passed away November 26, 2021, days before the world premiere. He did, however, get to see the final cut of the film and prefers this version of the film to the 1961 film, as he had told Stephen Colbert on the latter's late-night talk show. While she has played Maria in plenty of stage productions of West Side Story, this is Rachel Zegler's first film role, and Spielberg credits her as the greatest Maria he's ever witnessed. Film follows the original song order of the stage musical, with just 2 exceptions. G. Officer Krupke is moved to earlier, as the 1961 movie also did, and Cool, usually performed before the War Council in the stage musical, is sung here by Tony to Riff rather than being sung by Riff to the rest of the Jets. In the 1961 film, Cool was placed much later after the Rumble and was performed by Ice, known as Diesel in the stage musical. 2021 film changes that character back to Diesel with a separate jet, also named Ice, created for this film. And lastly, as I alluded to earlier, there are no English subtitles, if you're not watching with subtitles on, kind of thing. When the characters are talking in Spanish regarding this decision, Spielberg explained that this was done out of respect for the inclusivity of our intentions to hire a totally Latinx cast to play the Sharks boys and girls. If I subtitled the Spanish, I'd simply be doubling down on the English and giving English the power over Spanish. This was not going to happen in this film. I needed to respect the language enough not to subtitle it. Spielberg has also previously been on the record disliking subtitles in general, believing them to be distracting, and generally avoiding the use of them in his films. So that's the trivia. There we go. So what did you think here, Logan, of West Side Story 2021?
I liked it. I liked it a lot. I watched it in 2 separate blocks.
Mm-hmm.
I basically did the first 90 minutes and then I did the last hour, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Kind of an Act 1, Act 2 break.
Sort of kind of thing, yeah. And in that vein, it was really interesting to watch because Act 1, I think, by the design of the story, is a lot more romantic and showy and kind of beautiful and all this kind of stuff. And Act 2 is just everything bad is happening now, right? And so it was kind of neat to watch it in that context as well, because an Act 1 and 2 framing of it. I think the performances across the board are really, really great. And in particular, as someone who's seen the 1961 version, a few different times, the way this film, I think, highlighted and added so much more depth to characters that were important in the original one in 1961, but I feel like, that one was dominated so much by Tony and Maria. And this one given, I feel like, Riff and Bernardo so much more, I think, depth to those characters and making them so much more interesting for me. I really appreciated and I really liked.
Mm-hmm.
And both as actors, I think, really delivered well. I think that Ansel Elgort and Rachel Zegler have really good chemistry together. And both are great in their moments. I'm sure we'll probably get to favorite songs throughout the movie, right? But in particular, anytime they were together and singing were pretty routinely my favorite moments of the film.
Interesting. Okay.
In particular, technically it's him by himself, but Ansel, Tony singing Maria is probably my single favorite song in the entire film. Just and it's, to be fair, it's short,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it's such a beautiful love song, really, and just the excitement of that and the infection of it and the way that Ansel, I think, plays it, I really loved. Which is not to do any sort of disservice to all the other classic songs, Cool, or what would probably be my second favorite song in the film, America, which I think is done in spectacularly grand fashion in this film compared to the original, which I really, really loved. I really enjoyed it. I think it's a really great modern adaptation of one of the most iconic pieces of American stage musicals probably ever, right? I mean, not even that. I mean, you have all that, but then also the fact that like I hadn't, you know, I had forgotten the fact that it had won 10 Academy Awards as well. That it's like one of the most decorated films ever as well. So like to live up to that, I think this film totally does that and then some.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this was definitely one. I remember like seeing the first trailers and being like, this is such a weird pick for Steven Spielberg to like want to come and do this. And like finding out, I didn't highlight it there in the trivia, but like effectively like this is a super huge passion project of his that like he remembers seeing as a kid and basically like has always wanted to take a stab at it himself. So like this is, and I think you see that in this film. Like you see how much he cares about making this a not only like a good film, but also like making it worthy of just existing. Like, because he could very easily have been like, well, I don't think I can improve upon the other one, or you know, or even if I can improve upon it, do I need to? Like, does this other one need to exist? And I think. Like I remember seeing kind of the first trailers and being like, I don't like, I like my initial reaction was largely like, is he trying to do almost that like Vince Vaughn Psycho thing of like, he's going to do like a shot for shot kind of like look and feel and remake of this. And so I was very like, I was largely turned off by it and just kind of like, whatever, it's going to be a thing. And then like, in particular, I think because there was like just this weird glut of like movie musicals last year. Like In the Heights was one of the first ones back. It was like one of the first movies I saw. I think it might have been the first movie I saw back in theaters when like it was more or less safe to do so. You had like that. You had Tick, Tick, Boom. For better and worse, you had Dear Evan Hansen, still, you know, a very prominent musical, even if it has a lot of problems, and the film version did as well. And then, you know, in addition to like Encanto and things like that, and then this one kind of like closing out the year, it was like, oh shit, like no, this like I remember first being excited about it because the like review embargo for critics kind of broke, and they were like, this is a phenomenal version of this movie. And a phenomenal retelling. And like, this is Steven Spielberg, like finding that magic again kind of thing. And so I remember going and seeing it and being like, yeah, no, I appreciate everything that's going on here. My issues that have long existed with this musical in general still are largely there. In particular for me, which I think is interesting based on kind of what you said, like Tony and Maria tend to be like the least interesting parts of this show for me.
Sure.
Not that like their performances are great, especially like I especially like Rachel Zegler. I think Ansel Elgort isn't bad by any means in the role, but I think like him up against all of this like extremely Broadway caliber talent makes him look a little bit weaker by comparison for me. And so like when we kind of have to like, whenever we have to circle back to their love story, I'm just like, okay, but I want to get back to Anita and Bernardo and Riff and the Jets. And so like, those for me are the elements where the movie comes alive. And like America is, I think, a phenomenal reinterpretation of that number, rather than being, you know, just kind of like very insular in the community and like set in one location. Like the fact that they run through the neighborhood while showing you the like gentrification of what's going on in this neighborhood, and basically like, things have gotten bad for like the white kids in this neighborhood as, you know, an upper class kind of comes in. This was also just like a phenomenal kind of companion piece too in the Heights last year. In no small part because like so much of In the Heights is inspired by West Side Story as well. But yeah, it was like seeing kind of those elements and the vibrancy and color and like the community of America, for me is the easy standout in here. But then like on top of that, I like well, I don't necessarily like the Tony and Maria stuff kind of draws me out a little bit, but like Tony and Riff, I think there's a lot of great stuff there. Maria and Anita, I think there's a lot of great stuff there. And so like the decision here to turn cool into Tony trying to talk down the Jets from the the fight, I thought was like really cool. And like that was another one that like I really appreciated that different take on the film. Mm-hmm. One of the things I will say I loved, and also the decision made me miss a little elements of the original version, is by making Rita Moreno Valentina here and kind of like replacing the Doc character. Mm-hmm. I loved how that like recontextualizes some scenes. I didn't love giving her somewhere, because typically in the show that is sung by anybody's, and it has this like beautiful. I mean, it's typically done alongside like a ballet kind of sequence as well, but it's, I think, like a cool, interesting standout moment for that character who throughout the whole rest of the film is kind of getting pushed to the side, and despite them knowing who they are and knowing what they want, it ends up being like this really cool kind of like 11 o'clock number effectively. And by giving that instead here to Rita Moreno, like I get the choice. I fully understand that. And for what they're doing, I fully appreciate it. But it made me be like, well, then what's the point of having anybody's in this movie for so much of this, for a lot of the story? Is it takes away one of like their biggest elements from the movie. So I thought that was like a little bit of a miss for me. But I do love that it also sets up this idea that Tony and Maria can work. Like Valentina and Doc is proof that, that boundary isn't as, as separate as, the movie might otherwise kind of present. Obviously things don't go that way. But it definitely sets like this interesting, like, oh, she can serve as a role model in multiple ways as a result of that. So I thought that was, again, a very interesting choice.
Yeah. I mean, I think I really like the character of Valentina for exactly that reason, right? I think having her be this person who can be a conduit to both the Jets and the Sharks and both their respective communities, and, I think the level of intimacy she has with both sides of that, and with all these kids, as she says in one scene, like, I've known you all since you were kids, right? I think makes her a stronger character in terms of like the emotional feel she has for everyone than Doc was, who I think by the nature of who Doc was kind of more slanted in one way. And I also think it makes her relationship with Tony really interesting too, because she is this done successfully, right? And that lesson, right? Like, it is the star-crossed tragic lovers that actually made it out alive, right? Like in a way that like Romeo and Juliet doesn't have, where like so many countless stories based off of this similar idea don't have, and didn't show them like, hey, it can be done. It's not easy, as she makes clear. Like it'll be hard, but like it is doable. It is achievable. I thought was really, really interesting and led into really great moments for her, right? And so when we do get to the moments of her, both at the beginning and ending of the film, like basically giving Tony the strength to go to the dance and like make him think that he can do something with his life, and then when he finds something that he wants to do with his life, which is be with Maria, and then just kind of deliver the news that she's dead, or so she sinks. I think she gets such great, powerful moments with Tony in the film, and I think it's heightened by the fact that she is just a more fleshed out character than Doc ever really is. And you also have Rita Moreno playing her, so it's played by a great actress. In terms of, your earlier point, like I definitely agree that the Tony and Riff stuff I found really interesting. In particular, like I found watching West Side Story this time around to be for it to be really interesting because I think the movie focuses so much on, you know, the fact that it is taking place 60 years after the original, right? So they've had 60 years of history to see how things come afterwards, right? And how what unfolds, right? We know the fact that Lincoln Center is built, and as they reference a lot in this film, which I don't remember from the 61 original film, like none of this matters. The entire fight is pointless because the land is going to be gone in a week, right? Like it's sort of this thing of like this entire blood feud between the Jets and the Sharks takes on even more kind of dark humor tragedy to it because it's fighting over land that no one will have in such a short period of time, right? They're all going to get pushed out of it. And, you know, they reference that repeatedly throughout the film, including the first time you see like the cops come into the movie, they're again going there. But even after the Rumble and Bernardo and Riff's death, right? Like when Chino brings the gun to the boxing gym, right? And one of the other, you know, sharks there is like, Bernardo was wrong, right? Like, don't be like him. Don't waste it over this piece of land that isn't our, like, we're going to get pushed off of anyway, right? Like, don't make the same mistakes here, right? And I loved that dynamic of it. And I think it feeds into this idea of, you know, the three characters who die in this film are the three who, in some ways, are like the most promising of the bunch, right? And you can kind of add in Chino with that as well, right? For like the fourth element of like, the ones who had the potential to do something better, right? Who were the leaders of this group who could have inspired their guys to like have a better life. And Chino very clearly is representation of like, you know, what Bernardo kind of wants a lot of his, like wants his sister to live like, but also like probably wants a lot of his friends to live like be educated, go to school, get a degree, make a living that isn't fighting in the ring, right? And to see him be the one who kind of like spells so much trouble at the end. Obviously, Tony dies, Riff dies, Bernardo dies. Like the four kind of central characters who suffer so much. I found it interesting watching this time through the lens of like so much wasted potential and so much wasted talent. And I think Spielberg highlights that in really interesting ways that I think in the 61 original, it's harder because they're just older men. they're just not as young or young looking even, right? And so it's more just like, yeah, like, but they're older, so it's fine. Whereas here, they all look so young and so baby face. And it's like, what a, like, terrible, terrible loss of life just as it's getting started. And yeah, I found that element of this film really interesting as well.
Yeah, real quick, back on the Rita Moreno as Valentina aspect. One of the other elements that I love about the film, and I talked about this a little bit in, I think I talked about this a little bit back when I talked about this on That Nerdy Site show after seeing it in theaters. There's this beautiful meta quality to the fact that to when Anita comes in and like ends up yelling at Valentina and the Jets there and kind of like telling them that Maria's dead and Chino's got a gun, all that stuff. Because it's this weird meta moment of that's what Rita Moreno, like that's what she did 60 years ago. And now she's on the other side of that conversation in the doc role. And like that must have been just such a surreal kind of like acting gift for both, I think for both Ariana Dubose and for Rita Moreno there, of just getting to like play with all of that, like that kind of just ingrained tension and like the power of the history of that sequence. And because obviously like that is going to be one of the like iconic elements that gets Rita Moreno the Oscar and you know, the like one of those highlights and you know, one certainly a standout performance here for Ariana Dubose as well. And so it's just this weird like almost a literal passing of the torch kind of one generation to this new generation in a really cool way that obviously I think is you know, I think there is some intention behind that from Spielberg's part in the casting there. And yeah, just a really cool like meta moment to this film that you don't typically get in like musical theater kind of stuff like this. It's almost that like, you know, the you know, like the Spider-Man No Way Home, you know, factor, but here in a 60-year-old musical.
Story.
It was just a cool little thing. What did you think about the like the choreography and the performances and all that stuff?
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, I think America in particular is just such a great dance number, right? And you already touched on a lot of, I think, the parts that make it so special, like the way they weave the different neighborhoods and show kind of the beating heart of their community in so many ways, but also like the encroaching outside forces that are going to ultimately, you know, kill it off. But it's just such a joyous number, right? Like there is such a sense of joy, I think, throughout so much of like the first act of this movie. And it's infectious, right? Like I think West Side Story to me is one of those musicals that you can't almost help but just like want to dance after watching too, right? Or like just like, or as you watch it even, just like be like, I just want to move and like dance along with them because it's so infectious. The music is so catchy and just like gets under your skin in like all the best ways. And the performances and choreography I think is so great. Like obviously jumping ahead in the film from America, but like to Cool, I think it is such a great like interpretation of that. And the fight dance off between, you know, Ansel Elgort's character of Tony and Riff is like great and a ton of fun. And it is the, I think, number in the movie that feels the most musical theater still in a lot of ways, and just in terms of like how they're like dance fighting basically for the gun. And I loved it. I think it's great. I'm a sucker for that, and I think the physicality of both those actors played really well with one another, and then like the background set of guys as well once they get involved. Like I think the choreography for that, like those two numbers in particular, I think is so good. Then you get stuff like I Felt Pretty obviously later on, but like America and Cool, I think, I guess pun intended, like they're just so cool. There's just a sense of like that to them that they just kind of carry themselves away, and you just can't help but get swept up in it, I think. And then you get just like obviously slower sequences like Tonight or Maria, juxtaposed to things like the dance hall sequence and how well executed and like absurd of a, you know, film shoot that is. Like I think the film is just from a technical level all across the board, from like choreography onwards, I think is just like kind of a masterclass. And it shouldn't be shocking after Steven Spielberg has been doing this for almost 50 years now. But it still somehow is. And I think one thing that I wanted to, like, I made a like very conscious note of that I wanted to shout out is like, I think the lighting of this film is immaculate. Like there are just whole like scenes, the way they're framed, the way like the light is filtering through, that I was just like, God damn it, Spielberg. Like in particular, like everything happening in the church where they do One Hand, One Heart, and like the way the light filters in for Tony and Maria, I thought was just like beautiful. And then obviously I've seen a lot of people talk about it online, but like the puddle shot of Tony and like the ripples of the water out when he sings Maria is also excellent and technically very, very impressive.
Yeah, I remember that being like one of the, like the image of at the Rumble of them like walking into the salt factory and just like the shadows of the light being cast across like of both like the Jets and the Sharks. I remember that that being like the one thing in the trailer that I was like, oh, that's like a really cool looking shot. Like whatever else this movie is going to happen, like it's going to have like cool moments like that. And yeah, I kind of in a lot of that same vein, I think even from kind of the opening like overture sequence of the Jets coming in through all of the rubble and the destroyed neighborhood to establish basically like the stakes are yeah, this neighborhood's already gone. Like
Yeah.
they're fighting over literal dirt and
Yeah.
like rubble and the ghost of, what
Once
was.
was.
But like the show, like, certainly I think the original, like, Jerome Robbins kind of choreography has reached this point almost of like parody over the years, in that like it's absurd to have like two gangs ballet dance fighting kind of thing. And like this is, I think, the first time I've really seen it where, yes, there are elements of that, but they also have like menace behind them in certain moments, and they don't go like full tilt into it. I think they do kind of pull back from that a little bit and have like those moments flavored with like actual like fight poses and like that kind of like manning up and muscling up kind of against one another and stuff in, I think, really interesting ways. In particular, also in the dance hall sequence that you kind of mentioned there earlier, like there's this like beautiful balancing act between the like mambo that they're having and also like the tension of trying to share the gym and like fight with one another and constantly kind of like being ready to break loose at any point. I think they certainly knock that out of the park as well for me. And yeah, like they're like the lighting and cinematography and like framing of this film, I think, not only in those moments that you kind of highlighted, but also in like A Boy Like That, and having like like Anita kind of like
that's a great shout
yell at Maria in the mirror or through the like multicolored sheets of kind of her little workshop in the apartment, stuff like that. Like there's such intention behind so much of this film in a way that like feels fresh compared to so much of the other stuff I think we see these days, that helped make it feel alive. I heard somebody describe it as like, this is the first time they've felt while watching it like they were on stage as a musical was happening around them, kind of thing. And I think there's a lot of moments in this that like are shot deliberately to give you kind of that sense, as opposed to so often it can feel like you're seeing this on a stage in front of you, or the movie is framed as like a stage play kind of thing might be. But in sequences like the dance hall or like America, where like you're in the action with everything else that's going on, I feel pretty even like you're kind of in there as, the other kind of maids and cleaning women are, dancing around both Maria and you, the audience, kind of thing. Just in really cool, interesting ways.
I was looking at a message on my phone that like one of my buddies sent me, who is like a filmmaker in his own right, and just loves films and obviously makes them and all that kind of stuff. And he'd actually seen West Side Story a little bit before me, and his 2-word review of it was just cinema church. And him just like, it just feels like it's just like going to church if you love films, watching this movie, and watching it through, I was like, I get it so much. And just like all the small technical details that someone like him would love, and in the larger kind of more colorful flourishes that anyone can kind of appreciate. I think this movie is such a well-crafted film. And to kind of piggyback off of something that you said kind of near the beginning of the podcast, like, I think there is a sense of love in every single frame of this from Spielberg. Like it very much feels like, this is a film that probably did inspire him to get into storytelling, right? And to get into films when he was growing up, and he wanted to do it right, and he wanted to do it well. And I think that love carries over into virtually every single scene in the movie. And that is sort of contagious, and you can't help but feel, I think, the passion and love he had for it carry over into the performances and carried over into the overall film as a whole.
Yeah. Shout out to, just want to give them a shout out here. Januz Kaminsky, as the cinematographer / director of photography, frequent collaborator with Spielberg, on projects like Ready Player One, going all the way back to like Schindler's List and stuff like that. Also, obviously you weren't on it with me, but you realized you would have been if you'd known I was doing it. Tall Tale. Yeah, he's also the director of cinematography.
That's right.
On Tall Tale. And
Tall Tale's so
Jerry
good.
Maguire and Little Giants.
Jerry
and,
Maguire also good.
like friggin' Nicki Minaj and who else was it? Lady Gaga music videos and stuff like that. Like, just a very, very prolific career out there. So shout out to that. But because so much of this is like just the beautiful composition of a lot of those shots. And again, it feel like In the Heights is like the beautiful happy ending kind of version of this story in a lot of ways. And knowing just as another kind of fun fact that like those two movies were basically shooting blocks away from each other at the same time a couple years ago is I think just another element of like, oh, that's just like really cool like synergy between those two projects. Cool.
I will say before we get to like the report card that I had somehow, and like I don't watch, I've seen West Side Story like probably 3 times before this. I had completely forgotten the fact that Bernardo dies in this movie. And so, and like I should have known that because like as well as I know Romeo and Juliet, like obviously that a character like that is going to die, but I'd completely forgotten that. So when that sequences happen and I'm like, wait, and then like as I'm thinking like, is this what's gonna happen? And like Tony stabs him and was like, oh shit, like yeah, like all right, like it is gonna be a bloodbath by the end of this movie. And so I definitely had like blacked that out from my mind apparently. And so when it happened, I was like, whoa, oh god, okay, yeah, this is we're doing stuff like that, I guess.
Yeah, I remember you asked me like, God, it was probably like a year ago now or something like that. But like you texted me at one point or messaged me in Slack at one point, like in West Side Story, do Tony and Maria die? And I was like,
yeah,
no. In West Side Story, only Tony dies. It like like that's one of the ways they kind of diverge from Romeo and Juliet is like Juliet lives on in this kind of story. But yeah, like even like that, like I had forgotten that like Chino's the one that kind of like it's the equivalent of like Paris from the original one, basically coming back at the end and deciding to seek revenge on Romeo or something like that. So I'd forgotten that like there's that extra hint of tragedy of this otherwise promising character like being sucked into just the heartache and pain of this, as you kind of like pointed out, very pointless feud, very pointless war. I think it's also like sadly telling how much this movie still resonates and still can resonate. 60 years on, how little seemingly has changed, societally, and in some of the racial kind of like underpinnings of the struggles that are happening kind of in this area. Like that's like the more things change, the more they stay the same.
It's interesting, partially because of like the real world, like Supreme Court confirmation case that's happening right now. But like a reporter for, I think the Washington Post, shared out like a Gallup poll data for like apparently the last 60 years, because in the 60s happened. But for the last like 60 years, basically being like, the percentage of Americans who are basically in favor of like interracial marriage and like the percentage over time.
Yeah.
And the poll basically started in like 1960, like basically the early 60s. So essentially when this movie is happening, and it was 4% at the time. Right. And so it's obviously much higher now, but like when I saw that number to now, I just have been thinking about it for like all weeks, and I saw that. And like, this is a movie that takes place in a timeline where like our parents were alive in that world, right? Like you have to kind of remind yourself that like, this isn't that long ago. And it's also still, as you said, like so frustratingly relevant still, as we're seeing in like Supreme Court cases here and so much other in America that's going on right now in the world. How disappointingly relevant a lot of the racial issues at the heart of the movie still are.
Yeah. Yeah. If no other favorite moments or scenes or highlights to shout out, we can dive into the report card where you grade from A+ to F. What do you want to give West Side Story here, Logan?
I'm gonna give it a B+. So actually, if it had just been a review of like the first act, I would have given it an A. I really liked it. My really only / biggest critique of the movie is actually largely centered in the last hour of the film, where I think, and this seems weird to say maybe for a 2.5 hour long movie, I wish they had actually given things more time to breathe. Once the rumble happens, I think this movie is going at such a quick pace that you don't have a lot of time to just breathe as things are happening. And that's not really the movie's fault. That's just kind of what the play is as well. And so it's the nature of a 2.5 hour long thing. But like, I would have almost been more in favor of this being like just a 3 hour experience across the board and just giving us a few more beats to kind of absorb what's happening. And so like, I ultimately give it a B+, but I think it is absolutely incredible. In pretty much every other way, from the performances, to the music, to the choreography, to obviously the technical aspects of the film as well, as we kind of gushed on.
Yeah, I think I'll land there in B+ territory with you as well. And again, like for me, the musical traditionally or typically for me is probably like a C-level musical, but I think this does such a great job of elevating a lot of the material, and the performances kind of across the board are phenomenal. But like there are still the things I hate about this musical, like Tony just killed your brother and you're gonna sleep with him. That's a very weird thing to
definitely have that
to try and like push against, and I don't know how you effectively push through that. And I think that's one of those things that like the very condensed timeline of this story of like, oh, this is taking place over basically like 2.5-3 days kind of thing makes it a really hard, like it, because it's also like the absurdity of they just met at a dance and now they're already in love and they're already like willing to get married in a faux ceremony together. It's like, that's very like it's definitely like young love, and that's this, it's the Romeo and Juliet story as well, but that doesn't mean it feels genuine, or it just makes it that much harder to try and make it feel genuine in this day and age.
I'm curious for you. I had the thought while like after I got to watching, I was kind of going for a walk, and I had the idea of like, I'd have loved if they'd almost done what they had done in the film adaptation of In the Heights, or like they allow it to take place over a longer period of time. They just give like one basic scene being like, oh, like weeks have passed now kind of thing. Because all they really could have done in this movie is just put like one montage of like Tony and Maria hanging out for like 3 weeks. And I'd been like, sure, that makes even that little more time just make this make so much more sense. Right? Like, and allows that relationship to develop in a much more natural way, I think. And you can even do it in stuff like, Bernardo getting increasingly angry that he can't do something to Tony, right? And like allow these, I think, moments to just kind of simmer would have allowed the payoff to be just a little bit stronger in that ability.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think if you could like pad out time between Tony and Maria, getting introduced, you can even have like tonight happen that night kind of thing.
Yeah.
But then like give
montage.
it a couple weeks before the rumble happens or something like that. And then even like after the rumble, give it time for kind of like Tony is in hiding for a time there, and
that's
people kind of like, I think so much of this is hindered by the fact that verisimilitude of let's make it kind of happen like in real time almost, for elements of the movie and the stage show, I think just kind of hurt it in that way. I think if you could kind of like have it just be built out over more time, or see kind of how these seismic events are impacting the rest of the community and whatnot, or how, or if they aren't, if it is like Tony and Maria are keeping in hiding and they're not letting Bernardo or Riff or anybody know that they're they're together for a couple weeks, and then it comes out, or it comes to a head. I think there's just more potential for a building simmering tension that just the timeline of this doesn't work.
Basically, just have us make the next adaptation of this movie. We got great ideas, guys. Yeah. All right.
But that's, I mean, I very much thought the same kind of like, I have my own issues, like, because I think there are elements of In the Heights that work better in the condensed timeline because it's not a tragedy. So like it is almost like I wish In the Heights had stayed in its like 3-day blackout window for everything that happens over the course of that story. And then, this one got a little bit more time to breathe. It would have been certainly, I think, an interesting juxtaposition there, but interesting thought.
And this isn't Sondheim's favorite musical of his either, to be fair. Obviously. Right. So he's talked at length, I think, about the fact that it is probably one of his least favorite that he worked on. So,
yeah. All right. Well, so B pluses across the board from us.
Still very good.
Yeah, still incredibly good. I fully expect Ariana Dubose to pick up the Best Supporting Actress Oscar, and shout out to her. She kills it in this. It'd be interesting to see if Spielberg like picks up a directing one, or if the movie wins. I don't think that either of them are the front runner at this point, but the Academy might just be like, we're gonna back our guy Steve. Who knows? But yeah, lots of.
I would love give him all the awards.
There you go. Lots of wonderful elements in that one. Extra credit, other suggestions if you like this. There is a kind of a side, kind of like making of something called Something's Coming, West Side Story. You can watch. There's also Into the Woods, another Stephen Sondheim musical. The Greatest Showman. Hamilton, which if you watch Hamilton and want more of our thoughts on Hamilton, you can watch That D Plus Show episodes 27 through 32, because we did a big old month and a half long series of me bringing on different people to talk about that show when it came out. You have the Disney Newsies film is out there, as well as Annie, and then Disney Newsies the Broadway musical that has, if you want more thoughts on that, you can listen to me talk about that over That D Plus Show episode 53. And then lastly, last recommendation in here is Mary Poppins Returns. Don't know why they went with that one instead of just Mary Poppins, but whatever. So shout out to all those options. Extracurriculars. You watching anything else on Disney Plus these days, Logan?
No, but I probably am going to watch the West Side Story thing.
The Something's Coming.
Again, Something's Coming.
Yeah.
Because I saw that basically as it ended. I was like, ooh, that looks interesting. I might check that out.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if I've been watching anything else on Disney Plus right now. Watched Turning Red, but that was probably a couple weeks ago.
Oh yeah, I watched Turning Red.
Oh, you watched?
Yeah, I just watched that. Remember? So yeah, I just did that.
There you go.
It is good.
Yeah, that's you.
I think it's
you were not. You're not behind the like. This is the second coming of Pixar that I've seen a lot of in the timeline.
I think it's the definition to me of like a 7 out of 10 movie that is good. I think I'm happy that it exists, obviously, for a lot of people who do love it a lot. And I think for me, I don't have to love it. I think there are moments I like a lot. I think the last act is sort of where a lot of my issues lie with it. But
it does take a turn that I was not expecting it to take.
Yeah, I think that's sort of my thing. Yeah.
Cool. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I don't think I've. No, I did. They put all of the Netflix Marvel shows up on Disney Plus, and I went back and watched not all of, but I watched like a bunch of the first episode of Daredevil, because Charlie Cox really good.
Great.
So yeah, go check that out. In addition to all that, it's kind of in the segue into the outro, just a reminder that next week we will be doing Moon Knight. The first episode of that comes out Wednesday, so we will talk about Moon Knight for next Friday's episode. And then from there, we go into a month of Pixar movies, including Turning Red and Luca, some of Pixar's latest offerings, kind of from this pandemic digital-only release era. And then after that, going to go all the way back to their earlier stuff in A Bug's Life and in Monsters, Inc. And I know Logan has already basically said, like, he is 1,000% not doing A Bug's Life.
I might do A Bug's Life because Trevor shamed me for it on a podcast. So we'll see.
On that Bond show in a couple weeks' time, I gave him crap because I sat through the entire Roger Moore era. And he can't be bothered to sit through A Bug's Life for that D+ show. But we'll see who we get on those episodes. But that's basically what we have to look forward to in April. So stay tuned for all of that here in the weeks ahead. And that's going to do it for this week's episode of That D+ Show. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Logan, for joining me to talk about West Side Story. You can follow Logan at Lefty Logie. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Logan?
I will give a shout out to this. I have to get you expect that this is actually in the same timeline and not 3 weeks in advance.
Exactly. This is normal time.
I will give a shout out to this most recent week's episode of That News You Care About, where myself and Trevor went through our favorite video game characters. It was a ton of fun. And I really enjoyed that conversation. We each get to kind of do some deeper cut polls. And that's always a fun time as we kind of build to the 100th episode of that show. So go check that out on podcast services or YouTube.
There you go. You follow me at Trevor J. Starkey. I will echo that shout out, and I'll give that Bond show a shout out. The other show where you can find me and Logan talking about stuff. This last week's episode was For Your Eyes Only, right?
No, For Your Eyes Only. Where I'm working on Octopussy.
Yeah, where friend of the channel, Jarrett Green, joined us to talk about that one. Spoiler alert, I hated that movie, but go hear why. Then this weekend's episode will be Octopussy. So come check that out as we near the end of the Roger Moore era of that Bond show every Saturday here only on YouTube, youtube.com/thatnerdysite. And you can also find Logan's written piece companion reviews of each of those. And basically as soon as we wrap up here, I'm going to sit down and edit his Octopussy write-up. So that'll be ready to go live for everybody on Saturday. You follow all of us and all the latest from us over at That Nerdy Site. If you liked what you heard, once again, please like, rate, review, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Thank you for joining us. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, and class dismissed.